Yeah, Warriors, we taking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions of craft beer sport. Tolkien audio, we hold down the fort.
Okay, we're back at it here. It was a busy NHL trade deadline day. If you missed it a little earlier on, a couple hours ago, dropped episode 1493 talking all about what the Ottawa Senators did on NHL trade deadline day. Just kind of 20 minutes, quick hitter. As I mentioned on that episode, Rob will be back on the show on Monday. He and I will be in studio together for the first time in a couple of weeks. So no doubt he'll have thoughts on what the Sens did. And going to talk now a little bit what the Leafs accomplished. And I'm sure when we get to talking to him in a couple of days, he'll have very even-keeled and certainly reasonable thoughts about the Leafs as well, as he always does. Matt Robinson with you here. If you hadn't figured that out already, we're going to have another pint. It's Friday, right? Multiple shows on a Friday evening, multiple pints. This one comes from the Imperial City Brewing Company down in Sarnia. I don't know if I've had this before. It certainly seems like if I had seen it before, I would have tried it at the time, but I can't say for sure. This is the chocolate milk peanut butter porter from Imperial City, 6.2%. There are so many words in that title that I enjoy, so I'm looking forward to trying this one, as it was I think for the most part, a fairly enjoyable day for us Leaf fans. So why not celebrate a little with another little sweet treat? Oh, man. Holy cow, is that good. It says right on the can, may remind you of a peanut butter cup. And it reminds me of a peanut butter cup. I like that quite a bit, which is something that I said shortly after the trade deadline came and went at 3:00 on Friday afternoon. We can get into the deals individually, or we can just kind of run through what went out and what came in. But earlier in the day on Friday, we found out we were getting Scott Laughton, and that cost you your 2027 first-round pick and Nikita Grubyankin, which is a bit of a bummer. I don't know whether he's going to be any good or not, but he's a bit of a character. He's kind of fun. It was neat having him around. Very physical guy. Great personality on him. But he had a ceiling, and that ceiling might have been Scott Laughton in terms of what he was going to turn out to be. He was struggling a little bit to pick up the defensive end of the game. And so it maybe isn't any more complicated when you look at the way this trade came together. And we'll talk about Scott Laughton in a second and what he brings to the team and what he may not bring to the team. Sometimes I can be a little negative, guys. I think you know that. But in terms of what you got, it was probably the first round pick gets you Scott Laughton, and Nikita Grubyankin gets you the cap retention. Scott Laughton is making $3 million and has another year on his deal after this one. So to get Philadelphia to eat half of that brings him down to $1.5 million for a capable third-line player. I think you're happy with that value. And I did say when I first saw that it was Scott Laughton for the first-round pick and Nikita Grubyankin, that felt a little rich to me. Like, oof. And that's sort of, you could see as a bunch of deals were going on over the last couple of days and throughout Friday, that prices were high, and, you'd missed out on Brock Nelson. Apparently, we found out later from Bob McKenzie that Braden Shen wouldn't have waived his no-trade clause for Toronto. I was a little afraid of that player anyway, what you were going to have to pay to get him, and then what you were actually going to get in his ages 34 through 36 seasons. That scared me. But as some of these guys started to come off the board, and I guess we saw a couple of days ago, Jake Evans in Montreal sign an extension. Your options for a third line center were starting to get worn down and starting to disappear on you. So Scott Laughton, all of a sudden, you're like a first and Nikita Grubyankin, I don't know. But then you get more details, right? There is also a fourth and a sixth from Philadelphia coming with Scott Laughton from Philly to Toronto. So, a mid-round pick and a late pick they're just lottery tickets. I did wonder at the time that I saw that if that didn't mean they might be thrown into a package for something else later. Turned out they weren't. But you need some lottery tickets. The Leafs have traded away in the last several years several first-round picks and traded away some more today. So a fourth and a sixth are coming with them. And like I said, we didn't initially know that Philly was retaining half. So now it's Grebenkin and a first for Laughton at half his price and a fourth and a sixth. And you're like, all right, it's fine. It's a little much, but it's fine. I like Scott Laughton, I think, more than most people do, and that comes with a clear bias. He's a longtime Oshawa General. Let's go, you Jennies. I, as most of you know, grew up as an Oshawa Generals fan. So I got a soft spot for the guy. It's kind of fun to see him coming home. And you're getting him not just as a rental. You have him for another year. So I like it. He brings a little bit of that playoff style thing. He's not afraid to mix it up. He's sort of a 40-point guy at this point. And that's fine. You in theory have the guys who are supposed to be top scorers for you. And it makes me crazy all day today. I kept seeing the same things that you always see. The Leafs need to really get better defensively. And look, you can always afford to be better defensively, but in the playoffs for the last several years, you've heard me say it 100 times, the Leafs can't score. Scott Laughton can help with that. Sort of 15 goals, 35, 40 point guy, 15 goal kind of guy, maybe a 20 goal kind of guy if you're lucky. You can use that. A guy who can punch in an extra point that David Kampf isn't going to, that Pontus Holmberg isn't going to. That's a guy that throughout a 7-game series, does he get 3 or 4 points and a goal at some point in overtime, or a dirty one late when everybody's crashing the net? These are the kinds of things that Scott Laughton can help you with. He can also kill penalties. He is reasonably responsible defensively. Now, there was an interesting moment on the TSN Trade Center where Mike Johnson, who I like quite a bit, was pushing back on that notion a little, that this year Scott Laughton's underlying numbers, and brace yourself if you didn't catch this segment, defensively compare kind of with Max Domi, who's the guy we're hoping Scott Laughton is going to push down or push away from the center position. And he's right about that. I did do a little reading on it afterwards. But in his past, Scott Laughton this year isn't on a very good Philadelphia team. Last year, Philadelphia was the 4th best penalty kill in the league, and Scott Laughton was one of their chief penalty kill forwards. So he has it in him. He's not having a fantastic year that way this year, but he's not on a great team. Does he drop in with Marner, or do they leave Kampf with Marner and then go, it doesn't matter, Laughton and Steven Lorentz or something on the penalty kill? It's nice to have other guys who can do that. And I think part of the thought process there is, can you cut back some of those minutes from Austin Matthews, who's playing too much right now? He isn't scoring enough. Are the two related? I don't know, but it can't be helping. So bring in another capable penalty kill guy. That first round pick that you gave to Philadelphia isn't until 2027, which was interesting. The Leafs don't have their 2025 first round pick, and yet they didn't trade their 2026 first rounder to Philadelphia. They traded the 2027. And it was interesting that Philadelphia was willing to go along with that, especially when you were also asking them to eat salary and these sorts of things. And it made me wonder, good for you for being able to kick that down the road a little bit. And does that mean you got something else in the cooker? Or does it mean you would smartly like to use your first round pick in 2026 to break this up a little bit, all these years without a first round pick, and then give away the 2027? It turns out we would see later that 2026 was earmarked for something else. The 2027 is top 10 protected. So should things be disastrous, the Leafs will have their first rounder in 2027, and it would get punted to 2028. So that's the Laughton deal. And look, like I said, there were other options out there. We saw Tampa Bay go out and get Yanni Gourde a couple of days ago. That was a guy on the Leafs list. Brock Nelson went late Thursday night for an absolute haul from Colorado. I don't think Toronto could have matched that even if they wanted to. And I'm sure they would have liked to, but man, everything that the Colorado gave to the Islanders, I don't think the Leafs could have made that happen. And like I said, Jake Evans, like the guys started disappearing. Braden Shen ain't coming. This is the guy. And I make it sound like a huge disappointment. I'm not sure this was, in fact, I just named some other guys. I'm not sure this was the best guy available, but it was the best guy available you could afford without spending everything you were willing to trade in one move, which wouldn't have allowed you to do the things you were going to do later on in the day. One thing that is a little concerning, as I said a few minutes ago, I can tend to sometimes be a little bit pessimistic. He hasn't been playing Scott Laughton. He hasn't been playing center in Philadelphia much. In fact, his coach in Philly said, we sort of think he's better on the wing. Now, they made a trade with Calgary a few months ago. Morgan Frost and Joel Therapy headed out. And at that point, they did move Scott Laughton back into the middle because they needed him to. He has played plenty of center over the course of his career. But that makes me cringe a little. As he's gotten older, he's 30 years old now. Has he lost a step or something? What are they seeing? And even some people on the Leafs end of it saying, even if he can't play center, this is still a useful play. He's making, with the cap retention that Philadelphia gave you, you're only paying him $1.5 million for another year and a half. That's great value, even if he's not a center. But man, you need him to be a center. And it starts to remind you of guys like Alex Kerfoot. Can he play center? Yeah. Do you want him to? No. Max Domi? Yeah. But no. Calle Jarnkrok? Yeah. But no. I think this is an upgrade. I like the trade. I'm fine with what they gave up, what they paid to get the retention. As I said, when I first saw that it was Grabyenkin and the first, and we didn't know about the 2 picks coming with them and the cap retention, I thought it was too high. Once you factor those things in, you're like, all right, that's what you have to pay at trade deadline day. It's fine, I guess. But it does sort of bounce around in my head that like maybe he isn't the option. Maybe you haven't totally solved this issue. When he gets into town and you start seeing how he fits with different guys and, who is he going to play with? Is it McMahon and Robertson still? Do you still think Pacioretty might be back? Do you put maybe Jarnkrok on that third line and hope that it's a little more defensively responsible with him and McMahon? I don't know yet what this is going to look like, but I've got this little bell ringing in the back of my head that says there are at least some people out there who says this is still a good deal. This is still a good player. This is still a guy you want at the price you paid and with the cap retention, everything that you're going to have for the next year and a half. You want this guy, but he might not be the answer at 3C. That's sticking around in my head just a little bit. It's freaking me out just a little bit. Holy crap. That is such a good porter. Man, if you get a chance, try it out. The other move, and it started to feel like nothing else was coming. And I was pretty confident there would be more, but I felt like they had to wait until at least 2 p.m. when Ryan Reeves clears waivers. Now you have his cap space. Now, I don't know how this all fits, what the actual rules are. I know every day at 5 p.m., you have to be cap compliant. So could they have acquired the guy that they wanted to acquire with Ryan Reeves cap space at noon, and then he clears at 2 p.m., and so you're cap compliant at 5 p.m.? Maybe. I'm not sure how that works. Or did they actually have to wait until they find out, yeah, he's cleared, he's gone, he's going to be on the Marlies or whatever they're going to do there, and now you can go ahead? But it went a long time, even after 2 p.m., with no more news, right? You're like, there's got to be a reason that they kept that 2026 first-round pick. They've still got, they didn't have to use Fraser Minton or Easton Cowan or Ben Danford in the first trade that they made. So they still got all these pieces that they could deal. And at 2 p.m., you're going to have Ryan Reeves cap space. There's got to be something else coming, right? And that's what I thought all day while we were waiting for 2 p.m. And then it was 215 and 230 and 245 and 255. And you're like, hey, hello? Is anyone doing anything here? And it comes out right at like 250, 255 that the Leafs press conference that they were going to have at their hotel there in Denver is being pushed back from 3:30 to 4 o'clock. So you're like, there's something else still going on here. And not too long after 3 o'clock, you hear that it is Brandon Carlo from the Boston Bruins headed to the Leafs. Like, that is wild that the Bruins would deal a guy like that in division to a team they've been fighting with. That's so weird. Then you hear, oh, they also traded their captain to the Florida Panthers, also in division, also a team they've gone to war with. Bruins were ruthless. Just pitching pieces out the door all over the division. Yeah, we're going home. We're not going to make the playoffs this year. We're going to help you guys get armed so you can beat the shit out of each other, and we'll see you next year. This is sort of what it felt like. But Brandon Carlo is a nice piece. And again, a guy with term. Probably a number 4, but he's 6'5", good in his own end, clears the net well. He's not a disaster with the puck, but you're not going to see him rushing it through the neutral zone or anything like that. But he's one of these big, tough guys that I think they did need. Now, it comes with concerns, as a lot of things do. You guys have heard me talk over the last, I don't know, whatever it's been, year and a half, a little more than that, since Brad Treliving has been in charge, that they're getting a little slower, they're getting a little bigger. Are they losing too much puck handling ability? Brandon Carlo does not ease my mind on those fronts, but he is undoubtedly a good player. Undoubtedly can play in your top 4, play penalty kill, be tough to play against, and they really didn't pay that much. Now, I guess that's all relatively speaking. They have given Boston that 2026 first-round pick that they didn't use for Scott Laughton. And they gave Fraser Minton to Boston. Now, as I said a little while ago about Nikita Grabyenkin, that his ceiling is probably what Scott Laughton is now, I sort of feel the same way about Fraser Minton. He's probably a very good number 4 center. Maybe his ceiling turns out to be pretty good number 3 center. Well, you need a number 3 center right now. And number 3 centers, while not easy, aren't necessarily tough to come across. It's tough to come across a top-end scoring winger or a top 4 right-handed D. You can go out on trade deadline day or on free agency day and find a third-line center, like you just did with Scott Laughton. So if you can find a way to acquire what you need right now, which is a guy like Brandon Carlo, and you have to give up a prospect whose ceiling is third-line center along with a first-round pick, I think you just do it. I think you just go ahead and maybe you'll be proven wrong. Maybe he blasts through that potential ceiling that most people seem to think he has and ends up being a really good 2C, God forbid the next Patrice Bergeron or something. But nobody's predicting that. There's been no evidence that that's what's coming. So if you can get Boston to give you this big, tough, right-handed defenseman who screams Morgan Riley partner, I think you just do it. And you grin and bear. The Leafs have to be all in right now. Do you want to wait 2 or 3 more years to see what Fraser Minton might turn out to be and then find out it's just a 3C and you could have had this right-handed guy? You just do it. Now, to make room in terms of roster spots, in terms of cap space, they made a separate trade with Pittsburgh. Connor Dewar and Connor Timmins. We are down some Connors. They are leaving. Pittsburgh gave you, I think it was a 6th or maybe it was a 7th. Doesn't matter. A nothing bottom of the barrel draft pick. And they did you a favor. Took that money off your books so you could fit this guy in. Now, Pittsburgh, with what they're doing, you know, maybe they have a spot for Connor Timmins. Maybe they have a little more time to watch him and see if he can develop. Like, he'd had a pile of injuries. And then all of a sudden, Craig Berube kind of liked him in training camp, and he's been playing a lot in Toronto. Now, he hasn't been playing well in Toronto lately, but if you're one of those guys who subscribes to the fact that you got to give him a little more time because he's been hurt and because he does have some upside, Pittsburgh can afford to give him that. Toronto can't. So maybe that's how you talk Pittsburgh into doing this for you. But they took those two guys off your roster, so you had the cap space to do this. Sounds like Boston is also holding on to 15% of Brandon Carlo's $4.5 million contract. You have him for the rest of this year and 2 more years. And he's 28 years old. This is not a decrepit, aging, whatever the hell they did last year, bringing in more Ilya Lyubushkins and guys like that. He has regressed a little when I say Brandon Carlo. He used to be a little bit better with the puck and a little bit, I don't know if you'd say tougher. He would shut down chances a little bit better. Now, it might just be the Bruins have been getting worse, so he's been being exposed a little more. That's possible. But at 28, with what he is now, even if he has regressed a little bit, this is exactly the type of guy that Brad Treliving was always going to want to go out and find. And the beauty of it, or if you're a negative person, maybe a little like me, your blue line is locked up. You don't have to do this again next year. OEL is locked up. Tanev, McCabe, Riley, all locked up. And now Brandon Carlo is locked up. So if this works, if these guys all fit together, your blue line is good for another year or two. And maybe this is the guy that allows Morgan Riley to kind of get going again. He's been a bit better of late, but he's had a down season. Brandon Carlo is the stay-at-home guy, the physical guy that allows Morgan Riley to go do his thing. You can use McCabe and Tanev as your shutdown pair. OEL goes back to the third pair on his strong side where he always belonged. And you don't have to have 2 out of the 3, Philip Myers, Connor Timmins, and Simon Benoit all in the lineup at the same time. That wasn't going to be good enough in the playoffs, especially when you see what else has gone on in this division. So I think I like it. Again, my preference would be to go more high-end skill, more rush the puck. You have all these high-end forwards and you struggle to score in the playoffs. I would be looking for defensemen who can get them the puck, but that was never going to be what they were looking for. That's not what Craig Berube wants, and that's not what Brad Treliving wants. They've said it. Big, long, tall defensemen, big sticks, clog up the neutral zone. And frankly, my approach has failed. We've seen them go, like Travis Dermott didn't work. Jake Gardner, it didn't work. Like we've seen them try and have this more speedy offensive blue line, and it hasn't worked. So I think you hope that OEL can create some offense. I think you hope Morgan Riley can create some offense. Jake McCabe a little bit. And then you've got Tanev. You've got Brandon Carlo. Penalty kill, shot block, nasty in front of the net. These sorts of guys that that playoff philosophy, they're all over that. So in terms of what the Leafs needed, and again, like to say I prefer more high-end rushing defensemen, offensive guys, that's true. But you're getting Brandon Carlo for 2 more years at like $4.2 million. You do that. You do that all day. He's worth that. This reminds me a little of the Jake McCabe acquisition a few years ago, where he came in with 1 year and 2 more to go, and you got Chicago to retain. Boston's retaining, not as much. They're retaining 15%, but you've got him for 2 more years at a reasonable contract. I think you do this all day. So if it works, if these guys mesh together, your blue line is now set for a few years. If they don't, and if it doesn't, your blue line is stuck here for a few more years. So there is some risk to it. But all in all, I think you got mostly what was achievable, what you needed. A third-line center, you hope, and a big right-handed defenseman, which you definitely got. Are they the best possible options? Maybe in the case of Brandon Carlo. Probably not for Scott Laughton, but he's close enough, right? He can do that job for you, we think. So I think for the most part, it didn't come without risk, but you didn't have to trade Easton Cowan. You didn't trade Ben Danford. you're not going to make a first round selection until like 2033, but such is life, I guess. Like this is going all in for the Leafs. They didn't have a ton to trade, and they did come away with third line, good penalty kill, secondary scoring, and a big right-handed defenseman. So keeping things in perspective with what little you had to work with, it's a successful day, I think. And like I said, Braden Shen scared the hell out of me. Brock Nelson was the guy I wanted. The Leafs couldn't afford what Colorado gave up. So, you play the hand you're dealt, and you're walking away with a top 4 right-handed defenseman and a third-line player that you hope is your center. Even if he's not, he can score a little bit. He can penalty kill a little bit. It's not a bad day for the Leafs. It sure looked like it might be, right? Right up till after 3 p.m., we didn't know that second deal was coming. And it turned out to be a crazy few minutes of Bruins just vomiting their top players all over the division. Here you go, Florida. You can have Brad Marchand. Here you go, Toronto. You can have Brandon Carlo. Go beat the hell out of each other. We'll see you. It's crazy. I think there's going to be one more episode. Probably don't look for that until bright and early on Saturday morning. We'll sort of touch on some of the things that the rest of the league did, but all in all, not a bad day for the Leafs. And we'll see how it all shakes loose. Winning the division is going to be key. Tampa got a lot better. Florida got a lot better. Toronto got better. But as it's been for the last several years, 2 out of these 3 are going to have to play each other in the first round. You don't want to be a part of that. You want to be right there in first place, where hopefully you're getting Detroit, Columbus, maybe Ottawa, Montreal still in the mix, Rangers still in the mix. I think you take your chances there instead of the war that is going to go on in the 2-3 slot in the Atlantic Division. It's going to be insane. Maybe every bit as crazy as what's going to happen in the Central, where it looks like Dallas and Colorado, both who took big swings, are going to face each other as well. Things are going to be nuts. I'm not someone who loves this playoff format, but it is what it is, so I'm not going to complain about it. And every year it has guaranteed us a couple of crazy good first round series. So, like I said, we talked Sens on the last one. That was episode 1493. This is episode 1494. I should have done these in the opposite order. Could have, played off the numbers. 1493 reminds you of the big Doug Gilmour trade. Instead, that's 1494. I don't know. Sergei Berezin, or what the hell number did Yannick Perreault? Was that 44 or 94? We brought Yannick Perreault back at the deadline like 17 times. 1494 works. Like I said, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the other big trades that went on, and then we'll get Rob's opinion on a bunch of this and all kinds of other stuff. We got to touch base on spring training again, all of that on Monday when Rob's back in studio. So we'll put a bow on this one. My name is Matt Robinson. Thank you for listening. Have a great Friday night.
Yo, get warriors and drinking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town.